What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Stardust here. Welcome to a weird, different kind of video. I'm here with Joe Aberl from the Murphy's Multiverse, who's a friend of mine that knows about marketing, and today we're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy and their marketing. How you doing, my friend? It's nice. This is good.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
This is awesome.
Finally having to work in this industry is worth something.
I know. I finally like you. I imagine when you were doing, all your marketing stuff, that you were thinking one point, I'm going to get on Stardust's channel. We're going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. So for people who don't know, just before we get into this, what is like your marketing kind of qualifications, degrees? You know what I mean, like stuff like that. Like how do you know what you're talking about, essentially?
So my background is I studied for 5 years marketing and management. So I did my master's degree in it, and now I've been working for almost 5 years for a media agency, advertising agency, specializing in creating strategies for clients on best way to advertise their products, which actually involved Sony PlayStation for a little while, but a lot of different brands all kind. And so that's kind of been my background besides writing for Murphy's.
I didn't actually know about the PlayStation. You know what? Okay, I'll ask you about that. I'll ask you about that after this, right? Because that'll be a whole video. So, all right. So obviously with Guardians, it's coming out next month, and for me, being a complete marketing novice, I wanted to sort of talk about how like kind of lackluster, in my opinion, the marketing for this game has been. So. So obviously it come out as Square Enix Presents, and it had the really cool trailer and stuff like that, and it was, I mean, granted, it was the weirdest place to do it at, because it was a very not Marvel crowd, which is sort of, I get they can't help that because it's Square Enix brand, but like, it was a very weird audience to sort of debut it in front of,
Yeah.
So, but anyway, then they released the trailer, and then we didn't really get anything besides music, and then obviously they've just released some trailers recently. But like, what do you think about kind of going for like a music-focused approach? Because as someone who has no idea, my kind of assumption was they wanted to go through the MCU style. So like, obviously, the MCU is Guardians is quite music heavy, but the thing is that the MCU has kind of its own advertisement. Like, if you say this film is a part of these MCU movies, that already sells anyway. So having it as simple as like, oh, here's some music, get involved, party and stuff, it makes sense. Whereas like with a video game, it's almost like you have to resell it all over again. Like, I think the only people that could get away with doing a superhero game at the minute without much advertising is probably Insomniac, because people just trust them now. Like, they have everyone's trust completely.
Well, the thing you have to look at, especially when it comes to advertising, is there's this assumption that, oh, if you're advertising Marvel, you'll reach everyone. Because, that's kind of what Marvel built its brand on. But reality is that media, like video games and television and movies, they all have a distinctive audience. That's, while it could technically be everyone, that's kind of the elusive in advertising. You call it the A18 to 45, because that's pretty much just everyone, the main target demographic. There's still so many distinctions, because let's be honest, as much as like there's always the belief, oh, Marvel will sell, but the reality is that, yeah, a lot of people know Marvel probably more from the movies than the actual comics.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
And that's kind of the challenge, is that's why, like, if like these games came out before the movies were a thing, their personality, the views they kind of set are way different. And Guardians, the weird thing about Guardians is when they brought out this huge trailer, and like you said, they put it in a very Square Enix, Final Fantasy audience-focused setting, and we saw the backlash of it. A lot of people were mad that Marvel took up so much of Square Enix's time, and there was barely anything from Final Fantasy.
Which is strange.
Because that's like their main brand. It was really strange.
It's so strange as like a Marvel fan, especially with Marvel being kind of the colossal juggernaut, at least in the movies, the MCU anyway, is that what it is to have it at a place where it's actually like Marvel, you know, it's so weird. Like I was like, wow, when did this become uncool again? Like this felt like I was in school again when I was little, you know, before the MCU started. Like you like Spider-Man, weirdo. Like what? It was the weirdest thing. So like I can see
But it
what you
also
mean.
proves the whole audience thing, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
for
Like
sure.
an audience has. So the thing is that you learn in advertising really fast is that when you're trying to reach an audience, just saying, I reach everyone, let's say like with Coke, because everyone drinks Coke, or I don't know, Pepsi, there's, you know, any brand you can think of that kind of everyone just kind of assumes is there. Every element they do has a different focus. So, you know, if you're advertising Sprite, if you're advertising Fanta, even though they're all part of this Coke brand, they're still unique, distinct perspectives to them. And even the films learn that by pushing their different films based on the genre to different audiences. Shang-Chi has a very specific, Black Panther has a very specific audience, and such things. And with games, you do something similar, but it's kind of that on top of the Marvel brand is the Square Enix brand.
Yeah.
And we've seen like the track record of the people that they believe in the Square Enix brand when it comes to certain things. Outside of Final Fantasy, their track record hasn't been the best for audiences. Like it took a long time before people warmed up to the Tomb Raider games as well. And it's kind of like that drawback from that.
I've noticed with like Square Enix, and you know, like is that when it comes to their Western games, so not their baby Final Fantasy and stuff like that, they're very bad at like trying to market them themselves. You know, like it's kind of like it's like two different worlds. They've got Final Fantasy that, you know, that's their baby, Kingdom Hearts, stuff like that. That's their absolute. They love those series. And then they've got like, obviously you've got, you know, the Marvel games and just all the other Western games that they're just not that bothered about. And it's kind of weird because again, you would think that you market Marvel well enough and it will sell. But here's the thing, I think that the problem is that Square Enix, no disrespect to Avengers, but obviously the public reception is very much like, oh, Square Enix ruined it, right? For people that don't give it a try nowadays and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's very difficult to like see Square Enix smacked on the Guardians box, even though it's a different developer, but you know, people don't look into those things. And then make people think, yes, okay, I want to, you know, buy Guardians. You know, it's that sort of, so it's that on top of like, you know, oh, this will just be like Avengers, essentially, and it will put some people off. So I think, like, the fact that it hasn't been very gameplay heavy, I think has worked so against them so far. And as well as, like, with Avengers, I know people say it will sell. I believe it will in some cases. I believe Avengers can, like, if I walked into a shop and I don't know, I lost my internet for like 5 years, and I saw the Avengers game on the show, I'd pick that up straight away. I don't need to see gameplay. Like I'm a massive Marvel shill, I'll admit that, and it'd be the same with Guardians. But the thing is, Guardians, even though it's in the MCU, is a bit more niche, I would say. So like you do have to still advertise that quite a lot. So so obviously with that in mind, do you think that like Avengers, being how it, or at least in the public reception, plays a part in how their marketing should have been more gameplay heavy? Or
ironically, I think the advertising strategy is actually a reaction to the Avengers strategy back in the day.
Oh, really?
If you look back at the first reveal of Avengers, it was gameplay. It was A-Day, pretty much.
Yeah.
The only CGI trailer we got was like years before this, like tease with I think it was Kamala Khan's talking, we need the Avengers, and it says, you know, reassemble. That was the only teaser we had, which in comparison to like saying, oh, this game is coming, it was just like, oh, the game is in development of some kind.
Yeah, that was a long wait.
It was a long wait between. And the problem is at the time, it's like they kind of advertise it as an RPG, so no one had an idea like what exactly is this. And once Avengers hit, Avengers was like, I'll be honest, it was only gameplay. I think the only CG trailer we got
was the ad one they did right as it launched. Yeah, I remember.
And even the story trailers were all in-game. And if you compare that, for example, with Insomniac, with their Spider-Man and Wolverine trailer, that's pure CG. That's high quality, promising a high quality game through something that's probably not going to actually be in the game.
I have heard.
And
Just to defend Insomniac real quick.
Mhm.
Is that I do believe they mentioned that the Spider-Man trailer was in-game engine, so they used like the in-game engine to record that.
Mhm. I may have missed that.
No worries.
But
No, it's just that because obviously people might watch this and go, "Wow, what the fuck?" So I thought I'd protect you really quick from the Insomniac people. So anyway, yeah,
well, the thing is I prefer Insomniac strategy, even if it's in game or not.
yeah,
It's the thing is it's what we think of Marvel nowadays is a cinematic experience. It's I get to become this character and live in their world. And those CGI trailers, and this is like, I praise Insomniac's advertising way more. In some way, also Midnight Suns with their first trailer, is that it was kind of just like, this is the cool world you're entering and stuff. And Insomniac had the advantage. They're well established. The 2018 game, the Miles Morales game, were extremely well received. So they pretty much can throw a dart against the board and have a higher advantage going in.
they're insane for showing Venom off the bat. I think like that is that's a big dick play right there. Like but like it is like they could have held Venom off until 2023, like because people knew right from all the build up to it. I know we're going off Guardians a little bit, but it will come back full circle for anyone watching. Is that like, they could have held it off. Everyone knew Venom was on the way, but they were like, no, because everyone knows Venom's on the way, let's really market the fact Venom's in the game. Because I would say, count the movies, count just Venom as a character. He's very popular nowadays. Like, very, very popular.
Yeah.
So
I mean, plus they're advertising it 2 years in advance. And it's probably the big reveal that everyone was expecting to be in the game.
Exactly. So you mix that in, and you mix sort of I mean, if you're not like the world's biggest Spider-Man fan, then you might not know. But for like everyone, as soon as you hear the Russian accent, you're like, "Oh, it's Kraven!" Like,
yeah.
So I mean, you've got that as well, and it's like it was great. And Wolverine, that was sort of nicely well done. I think one thing that Guardians, that kind of it did well for its launch trailer was kind of, here's this. They did show gameplay to start with. They did show that 20-minute, but it wasn't really like... I don't think it showcased enough. I think it was very... Because, unfortunately, for me anyway, I mean, if people disagree, then just let me know in the comments, but be nice, is that the gameplay was a little... blocky, I want to say. It didn't look very smooth. And it was kind of like, okay, you've got this nice, beautiful world... cool, but like, that I want to see that gameplay be smoothed out. I want to see some of the options you can do. How does it work on other enemies and stuff like that? Like, and I think that, obviously the marketing can easily build up. We're still a month away, but I do think first impressions are everything. And I think a lot of people saw the first initial trailer and were a bit like, oh no, it's going to be an Avengers situation all over again. Square Enix, obviously, just itself being on the box didn't necessarily help with that. But also, just the fact that it was kind of, okay, here's the 20 minutes that we've picked out, and that's all you're going to see for the next couple of months. So, because, for example, with Avengers, A-Day was brilliant. It's been brilliant on the full game. It was brilliant in the beta. It was brilliant in the trailers. But when you get past that, when you get past the campaign even, that's when the issues start, right? So, obviously... it's very easy for someone to be like, okay, here's A-Day. It's like, brilliant, right? But where's the stuff that could be bad? Where's the stuff you haven't handpicked? You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's something I can respect for Midnight Suns as well, is that, like, they're about, what is it, six months, something like that, before their game comes out. And they showed off stuff, and it looks brilliant, but you can clearly see it needs a bit more done to it. Like, the walk-in animations and stuff in the Abbey. The hunter is essentially sliding across the floor like a penguin. You know? Nothing major. Not like it wasn't... I didn't notice it until someone pointed it out, but they're very much like... That's a very 6 months away from releasing problem, right? So the fact that you've sort of been like, here's what it looks like now, hypes people up, because you're like, wow, imagine that in 6 months. Imagine how polished it's going to be in 6 months, when it already looks very playable now, right?
Yeah, the thing that's odd about if you compare it, it's like how close, like Midnight Sun, we're getting about half a year in advance gameplay and all that, but it's very well picked up. You have the initial trailer, then you have the actual gameplay, and then they have weeks later the other, and we saw the fallback a little bit on that with the card system reveal. I remember reading a lot of people upset about that being the direction they're taking rather than what XCOM does. Now, the interesting thing about it is that if you look at Guardians was extremely front loaded. That trailer during E3, which is one of the biggest gaming conferences, like that's how you get attention to it. But it's really long. It almost a little too long in some regards, because it reveals entire sequences and then you jump straight into rather long gameplay sections. And even then, people were upset about the fact, understandably, that you only play Star-Lord. Everyone else, all the other members are just controlled via, I think, commands. So we're kind of seeing reactions to that potentially. Because the thing is, what you have to keep in mind with advertisements, they're planned months in advance. Advertisement campaigns aren't just things you do overnight. You need to have every video edited. You need to have every video pretty much signed off by everyone involved. So with Square Enix, what we're seeing with Avengers, you have Square Enix, you have the developer, you have Marvel involved, maybe Disney as well, to have to sign off on something. So that's a lot of paperwork to get through.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing where, like, it's interesting that Guardians is sharing a lot about the music, which I think they created an entire album just for the game with the Star-Lord band.
Yeah, they did. So essentially, I don't know if you know this, but Star-Lord in this universe gets his name from a band called Star-Lord. So they were like, okay, let's make our own debut album. So they've literally made like a full-on music album for this game.
Which is an interesting idea.
It's definitely cool, yeah. Sorry. I thought I was like, are you okay?
yeah, I'm here. No, I was thinking the thing is, there's a lot of great elements to Guardians, but the problem that I think you see a lot with this approach is that the issue they're facing probably is, how do you advertise the Guardians that isn't too much of a gun imprint? Because like the whole music aspect, the design for Star-Lord, the modern one and everything, and they're saying, oh, this is a brand new world, a very unique version of Guardians. But outside of some of the design choices, the core approach is pretty much the same as the movies, just with a heavier licensing on hard rock, our rock music, rather than the 80s pop music that they did, because Star-Lord was the name from the mother and the soundtrack was from her mother's time. Here it's more like, oh, this one rock band is the inspiration and everything. It feels like they kind of are doing their due diligence to say, hey, we're different. We're different than what you know, but we're still as much as fun. And it's kind of a weird juxtaposition to see this advertising campaign play out. But I do feel like there is a distinct lack of pushing that gameplay or doing at least one more showcase of like a level or what unique stuff you can do.
Yeah, I think that with Guardians is, I believe that, again, with the reception of Avengers being a lot more positive, like just in general even now, I think you would be able to get away a little bit with kind of maybe leaning into the more of those sort of elements. But I feel like because people want that kind of trust for this game, because people want that reassurance that there will be no dodgy launch here, you like, gameplay is definitely more important. Like, I remember seeing one of the developers on the Play Guardians of the Galaxy Reddit being like, this story is a bit longer than Spider-Man, and that's quite chunky. I mean, Spider-Man wasn't a short game, the original one. So, like, with that in mind, there's definitely a few levels that you could show off. Maybe just even combat sections that don't reveal too much, just to sort of see, if you polish that gameplay that looked a little blocky, like a couple of months back. Did you, because it's great. Music's fun. Yep, you definitely need good music in a game to be memorable, 100%. I mean, I still sing Persona 5's music to this day, like, so 100%. I get that. But if the game is kind of focused on that, then Like they put
Like,
a lot of emphasis on the dialogue choices, player choices, and stuff like that. But from what we have seen so far, they don't seem to really impact too much, other than the journey to get to the destination. So again, why is that a focus, for example?
yeah, that's kind of the thing where I still am not sure what exactly. Like, the thing is, what does, from a gameplay, you always talk about how gameplay and story kind of mingle together. And this isn't like Star-Lord becoming a bad guy or a good guy depending on your choices. So what's the definite goal by giving you players the choice of how things act out, outside of maybe, oh, you can have small differences when playing it again?
Yeah.
And that feels like an idea that probably should have been given a bit more focus, or at least an explanation in a way to, because that's something you can hype up about. Like, what happens if Star-Lord betrays the team if you get certain choices, or if people don't work with you, so you're pretty much entering a hard mode if you're doing the wrong choices or stuff like that. And they're not advertising what these choices mean, and that's kind of the dissonance that's existing right now between what's the game about and why are we here to play it. Like, they're selling us on, you're playing the Guardians, and here's cool music.
But technically, here's the thing as well: you're not playing the Guardians, so they don't even have that either. Like, so I mean, obviously they can say play as Star-Lord with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I do understand that kind of approach of, you're with the Guardians, but that's not what people want. So instead, they haven't gone for, here's what this game's about, here's what you do, etc., etc. It feels more like, they're going for everything else, because they kind of know how sensitive the topic is about only playing a Star-Lord. I mean, granted, we're only talking about this right now, like in, I don't know, the next week, all of a sudden marketing could ramp up. But at the moment, for someone who's, I mean, for me, I'll buy it even if they never advertised it again. But like, my point is that there's going to be people that won't do that, and there's a fair reason for that. Like, they might just be the wrong audience, but you have to attract kind of different audiences, and especially the MCU crowd at the very least, because that's a lot of money you can make off those people. So. And you've got the MCU suits in there. They confirmed that. So why haven't we seen them yet for that sort of brand synergy? Like, that, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, because I remember Spider-Man revealing the Iron Spider suit before launch as well. So
Yeah.
Again, it's many things like that you don't even have to necessarily show gameplay for it to make sense. But there's a lot more that people want to see and probably need to see.
Like, as from a player perspective, what I'm still wondering about is, we're talking about a story that takes place in space, and we pretty much see planet exploration, but they said it's a one-player story. So the thing is this open galaxy? I can select the planet, fly to that planet, and do something on that planet, like Jedi Fallen Order. That's what that game did, for example. Or, because there's also a brief tease that seems you can control their ship, do you have like Star Fox-esque action sequences as you travel from one planet to another? Is it a very linear story, or is it open world? Because we haven't seen like Ratchet and Clank, where you have like open areas to explore on a planet. Like, that's kind of the thing where, when you're trying to sell something to a player, the story is one element of many. You're not just selling, like with the movies, Guardians of the Galaxy, a trailer with an interesting story, great action, and good music. You're trying to sell them on, this is a fun game to play, I can play it again and again. But, Avengers, with everything that's happened, it's still a games as a service. So there's still stuff coming to it to fix it. There's a focus on that. It was advertised as such. But Guardians is a single-player experience.
Yeah.
But what does that mean for me if I'm playing this game? Like, there's them saying it's longer than Spider-Man. Does that mean there are side quests? Are there actual stuff I can do on the side? Is that pure the time I invest to do the story? Like, there's so many aspects of what even is this game at the core, outside of you control Star-Lord, that just leaves, I don't know if they're trying to go, there's a strategy in marketing where you try to tease things, but, let them kind of dangle in front like a candy. It's like, I really want that to know what's in there, but I don't know. It seems they're going for that strategy, but it feels like there's some aspects they could have maybe elaborated on a bit more, in my opinion.
I think that when you're so close to kind of launch, when they revealed it, it feels like we should have seen something big kind of each month leading up to it. Like, even if it's like a little stream where they go through like a as little spoilers as possible section, or they kind of like show off, you know, like some of the moves that each of the Guardians can do. Maybe go through the menus and stuff. Just be like, look, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. I think that if they do the approach of like, so, oh, okay, we're a month away, let's go crazy, I don't think that will necessarily be enough to pick up the attention of the people that were a little bit hesitant. I mean, for people that are kind of, you know, they were going to buy it anyway, then that's fine. But for people that are a bit like, I don't know, Square Enix, I don't know if I'm like the biggest Guardians fan either, like, I don't know what to do. It's sort of one of them situations of, you know, will that be enough by then? Or is it too late?
You know, the thing is, you can never, like, we don't have the research. So the thing is, what you go with advertising to say how effective is it, there's two elements. You can either advertise to see how strong the recall effect is, or the recognition effect. Recognition, as the name implies, is that when you show them the Guardians game, people go, oh yeah, I remember that. But your goal is always to have a recall effect, so that without even mentioning it, people go, oh, that Guardians of the game, the Guardians of the Guardians of the game, Guardians of the Galaxy game. And the thing is, it's like, even Avengers and Guardians, their trouble is also that the names are pretty much connected to the teams, to the films, to the comics. So it's not an easy thing to jump in and say, oh, the Guardians of the Galaxy game. And I think what they're trying to do is kind of bank on the brand recognition of the Guardians, and try to utilize that. And that's why that focus on music and the way these Guardians, their humor, etc. It's just kind of bank on, this is like the MCU films in game form, but for licensing reasons, be like, oh, but it's a completely new story. And now, as we're getting near the game release, I think what we're going to see is what usually happens in the last month. This is when TV spots come out. This is when the smaller ads are kind of pushed out to be like, hey, it's coming out. Don't forget, it's coming out. It's coming out. Because now all you're trying to do is remind people of the release date and try to lure in people that may have missed the earlier advertisements. So it's not unusual for, like, closer to release that it just intensifies.
I think that, like, again, like, you know, that makes a lot of sense. You know, we do see that, especially with movies, you know, like, I think Black Widow was a good example of that. I mean, then again, that was delayed a million times, so that's kind of a different situation. But when it was really supposed to come out, that things got quite, you know, heavy in advertisements and stuff like that, which is a shame because they used a lot of the advertisement beforehand. But anyway, so I get what you mean by that. I think that when this game is in the situation it is in, where, like, obviously branding wise it kind of needs to build a little bit of trust as well, I think that waiting for the last minute will scare a lot of people off as well. So, you know, I think that, again, it probably will work for the casual audience that wasn't too sure, but I think for people that are they're not in the know, but they're kind of in the communities that maybe want to move over and play some Guardians and stuff like that, maybe it is a little bit intimidating to be like, okay, I will bank on Guardians, you know, I'll give it another try. Again, different publishers obviously, and it's not, you know, I imagine a lot of any of the problems Avengers was facing was CD's fault, but that actually makes it worse. because of the Square Enix thing, because of that connection. So in that case, then, what with your knowledge would you change then before we finish up today?
You know, it's always troublesome because you don't know what exactly is the main strategy behind it. From my point of view, the best thing they can do, and this sounds, thing is, Marvel is still a very children, teenager-oriented brand. You know, young teenagers that want to play a fun game, be part of the Marvel universe, etc., etc. Personally, I work a lot with data, so my focus is always to say, you know, utilize data points, understand what your target audience is, test and learn. So that's also something you see a lot nowadays, because behind all these advertisements, like the discussions we're doing, and especially when we're talking about what's being advertised, we're talking mainly about social media. So that's kind of like the buzz aspect of marketing in that regard. What's happening parallel is that they're probably utilizing algorithms, maybe, I don't know, Google's algorithm, or even some advertisers. I don't know which agencies they work with, but they have their own algorithm that kind of helps support to find the right audience. What they're probably doing, and this sounds brutal, like where I live, there's a very fierce law against advertising for children. So you can't advertise like games to say, hey kid, buy this. You can't do that. That's illegal. But what they do is very simple. Hey, don't you want to buy your kid this game? It's not illegal then. And so what they do is pretty much mothers are pretty much the heads of households are advertised around certain seasons, around releases, to say, hey, there's this thing coming out. And it's like, oh, I think my kid will like that. Oh, I know my kid talks about Marvel or whatnot. So I think that's what they're doing. But from a social standpoint, in general, the advertising, I think they should start showing off. They shouldn't have shown off as much as they did initially. That was just a lot. Plus the audience there, we saw the kind of backlash from that. That was just too Marvel heavy for Square Enix fans. The thing is, what we're missing here is what DC's doing very well. They have DC fandom. That's comics, movies, and games. Marvel doesn't have that. And maybe pushing them to kind of have that kind of collaborative, kind of bring that together, that Guardians of the Galaxy, Midnight Suns, the Insomniac games, that they kind of also support each other, because right now it's a fierce competition between Insomniac Marvel games and Square Enix Marvel games. And to create this correlation between the brand of Marvel, that each studio is just bringing their own thing, and just try to focus on showing that support and building upon that by advertising, okay, this is what makes Guardians different. This is what gameplay is. This is what you can expect. It's the hard part about it is don't show too much. And that's what I think, like Avengers had the problem. It focused so much on A-Day. That's probably my biggest criticism on that advertisement, that every ad was A-Day. And by the time we rolled around to the end game, we didn't know what to expect, but the expectation was extremely high that it's so much more. Because they keep saying, oh, the game only starts with the campaign. In hours related, yeah, true. The campaign is very short in comparison to what you can do in the end game. But from a gameplay perspective, from a content offering, the end game is not, it doesn't offer anything new or surprising at the end of the day. And Guardians is a story-focused game, and they're focusing kind of on who's the main enemy. Here's the reason why he's Star-Lord or has the name. And I think that's not a bad perspective, but they do need to add a bit more gameplay focus. I think what Ratchet and Clank did well is that they had like segments. They said, okay, here's a short segments where they kind of talk about why did they do it? Why did they go this direction? What was the fun aspect of developing it? What was the challenge? To kind of humanize the efforts that are here, especially something I think we see with Avengers game is that, it's not an easy game to develop, but the assumption is that it's easy.
So kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. So it's not just music, yeah. It's sort of like here's kind of the struggles and the trials and the tribulations and stuff like that to get this sort of game out. And I think that's a good idea. I think that obviously similar to that, obviously. Like as an outsider, you want to, at least in my opinion, is I would be careful doing that too much, because you don't want people thinking you're trying to bank off sympathy. Which, I mean, I'm not saying like that would be the case, because obviously there are trials and tribulations to making games during this time. I'm just saying that people may genuinely see that as like, oh, trying to sell your game, eh, by telling me to expect the worst because there's been this, that, and the other. Because people are really skeptical, aren't they? And they'll read into stuff like that. So I think that like. I agree that like a Marvel fandom would probably be like perfect for these sort of things, because then you've got your audience, you're bringing them in, there is no fail to be had when that's the audience that's going to be there. So that's definitely a good idea. So from what it sounds like, from what we've both said, is it just seems like wrong place to reveal it, wrong attention being made, so sort of the wrong focus to the marketing. But obviously, again, we have about a month to see if they just go crazy with the market, and hopefully they do. Hopefully it'll be enough for a lot of the people who are a little bit skeptical. But for everyone watching at the moment, let me know if if you're feeling a little bit skeptical about Guardians of the Galaxy. I know that YouTube-wise, just as a YouTuber, Guardians isn't the most popular game in the world. You know, like for example, doing Marvel's Avengers content, even though it's still a Square Enix brand or whatever, and there was a lot of comparisons, is that it doesn't translate over very well. And I was looking at the views of Guardians on YouTube in general. Not many people seem to be as bothered, which is interesting. So, for example, a Marvel's Avengers Black Panther trailer, and I do get it, it's Black Panther, but that'll get like 3 mil. Guardians won't touch that. And I think that's quite interesting. And I think that could be, again, talking about the niche of Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'll be looking at how they're going to be advertising it going forward. But let me know your opinion in the comments, everyone. I want to thank you, Joe, for being here today on such short notice from a simple Twitter reply that managed to get this video going. So thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to say just before we wrap up today?
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast. It's funny to talk about advertising and marketing like this. You know, the thing is always to say we don't know the ins and outs of it. It's just, you know, they have their own strategy. A lot of companies do. I think at the end of the day, I just wish that a Guardians of the Galaxy game advertised more its space stuff, because it's just more planet exploration. But I personally am excited to see it. I think the visual designs are interesting, and you know, can't wait to see what else they have cooking. And yeah, it's good. It's, you know, it's still exciting. We're far away from cheap Marvel games that are kind of rushed out of production, and we're seeing more and more unique stuff. And it's going to be exciting to see what else heads our way. And Midnight Suns has still some time, so we'll see how they're advertise that and what else comes from that.
For sure, yeah. And then I can bring you back, and you can once again use all your advertising chops. So there we go. So I will see you guys in a bit. Make sure to follow Joe on Twitter. That I'll leave it down below. I'll also... Is there anything else that I need to link? You don't do Twitch anymore, do you really? You don't touch that?
Currently, sadly, not active, no. Time has gotten away from me.
Oh, okay. I'll link Twitter then, and then if Joe ever starts streaming again, then you'll be able to see it yourself. So, I'll see you guys in a bit, and peace.